All right, welcome back everybody to the MEIO Fundraising Team channel. We were discussing some general first year tips and tricks that we found helpful and that we would have liked to share with you. And in this video, we'll be continuing that trend by sharing some more academic and productivity related tips. As a reminder, if you check out the first part where we talked about general tips, please feel free to go back and have a look at that. We'll have the link in the description for you. But if you don't remember, my name is David.
And I'm Sankitha.
And I'm Rohit.
And we're going to be talking to you about some first year tips that we would recommend.
All right, so for some academic tips, so you want to create a study system that works for you, like know your limits or find out your limits and try to prevent yourself from like procrastinating too hard, or try some techniques out there. For instance, the Pomodoro technique, where I think it's you study for like 25 minutes and take a 5-minute break. Like find a study system, something like that. And we also some other stuff where some other tips where you could incorporate it into your study system.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you study in long periods, or do you prefer studying like with breaks in between? And just these sort of subtleties are really important to work out, especially in your first year. Because once you kind of establish a study and note system that works for you, you can kind of use it for the rest of your academic career, right? Mm-hmm. So in my first year, I kind of figured out how I like to take notes, how I like to review them. And, I'm still using that system today, even though like I might have upgraded it a little bit since then, right? And so it's really important to find one that works the best for you, because while they can change over time, you should really do your best and try to figure out a system that works the best to your strengths and kind of tries to like at least cover for your potential weaknesses. Like for example, like myself, I find myself procrastinating a lot, right? So, I generally try to set reminders for myself and like work in long breaks so that I can kind of just put myself in the mindset of, okay, I'm just going to get this like all done and then I can forget about it. So that's kind of like one way I like to study. But, that's not how it works for everyone. So I do encourage you to kind of go through, do a couple experiments with different types of systems, see which one you like best.
Yeah, and definitely just to add on to that, like, I think it's important to also consider like the location that works best for you when you study. I know for myself that I really enjoy studying in the library. It's just quiet. Everyone else is studying as well. So it just kind of motivates me to also be focused and not get distracted by things. And also the hour of the day. So if I know for myself, I sleep really early, and the later it gets, the less productive I get. So for me, like waking up in the morning, and that's where I do my best chunk of like learning and gaining information. So determining like, what time of the day works best for you would also really help you to like retain more information. So that's something to keep in mind when you're creating the study system as well.
Yeah, that's great. I just realized we're like complete opposites. I sleep really late. Like I tend to absorb information better at night. But yeah, literally like try to personalize your study schedule the best you can as much as possible. That way, you're literally using as many strengths of yours as you can, and just putting those into your study schedule, helping you ideally to absorb information, as Akita mentioned, as efficiently as possible. All right. So another tip we would like to suggest is to test yourself before you're kind of looking at some major topics, and then test yourself after as well. And the reason kind of why I found this helpful is that when you test yourself before you look at a major topic, you're able to determine what you do remember and what you don't remember from that specific topic. And so in doing so, that kind of helps you identify places of kind of more concern that you should be addressing, maybe spending a little bit more time on, versus kind of the stuff you're already familiar with, which obviously still you would have to spend some time reviewing. But if there's stuff you can't seem to remember from that topic, it might be worth addressing a little bit more than something you can remember off the top of your head, right? And so that's why it might be something somewhat helpful to study before. And also test yourself after, right? So after you've kind of identified those maybe gaps in knowledge that you want to address, right? Maybe come back to it after as well and test yourself. Like close the book and think like, okay, what can I remember from the subject, right? Like whether it's 10 minutes, whether it's an hour after, and just see if you can remember those gaps in knowledge that you might have missed the first time around. And that just really helps you kind of shore up your knowledge and make sure you're not missing anything really, really important about the topic. And that can just help you kind of solidify your information, make connections with different concepts and just stuff like that. It can really help you shore up your knowledge.
Yeah, that's definitely a great point. And one of the ways I like to kind of refresh myself on those major topics is I always take out a blank piece of paper at the end of like a major theme or a major lecture, and I just like jot down like the main points. And I do this like throughout the progression of the course. And then by the time a midterm comes around, I just kind of look at that sheet to see, okay, can I, explain, or do I understand these major topics? So just having maybe like one comprehensive sheet so you can write it or do it on like your computer, but one thing that summarizes main points, maybe try to keep it concise to one page. That kind of helps. So definitely, yeah, like you said, knowing those major topics is really key.
There's also stuff like Quizlet where like you can create mini flashcards. You can like use that to like test yourself.
Absolutely. And that kind of just goes full circle again to kind of setting up a system that really works for you, right? And yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and so just to move on to our third and final tip, it's that try to see if you're able to explain the concepts that you learn to someone else. So try to put yourself in the position of a teacher and see if you can explain those big themes to someone, preferably who may not be in this course, just to see if you're able to put it into maybe layman terms and explain those fundamentals. Sometimes you might come to a roadblock where you realize, hey, I can't actually explain this. So that helps you reflect on areas you might need to review again for yourself. And if you are reviewing as someone who is in the course, they can also ask you questions, which is really helpful. So you can see, am I able to answer these kinds of questions? And again, you can identify those gaps in your knowledge. And this kind of goes back to tip number 2. It's you're able to test yourself and evaluate, okay, maybe these are some topics I need to review again in a bit more detail.
Yeah, that's great. And I think like at the end of the day, when you're able to put something in your own words, it's a really good sign that you have a good grasp of that information, right? And so you might have encountered some of your professors who are like, studying and taking notes on laptops tends to help you retain less information. And the reason they tend to say that is because when you're typing, it's a lot faster and you just tend to type down what the professor's saying, like more or less word for word. Meanwhile, like if you're writing something down, generally there's that connection between your head and your brain that like physically writing that down that's different from typing, right? And so like that's one way people think like it makes a better connection if you're able to write it. But I would say like, if you're gonna type your notes, that's totally fine. I type my notes all the time. But I try to go out of my way to put things in my own words, right? Because that way, as long as you're understanding it and you're able to get a good grasp and kind of like rephrase it to people, like as Sankita mentioned, put it in like layman's terms, right? That's kind of key to understanding it. Because if you only have kind of one way that's like very kind of like a stubborn understanding of it that isn't able to kind of apply to the wide variety of accepted ways that that term is used in that field, right? Then at the end of the day, that's not going to be beneficial for you. And just having that ability to kind of like manipulate that understanding and put it in different words, that can be really helpful.
Yeah, I feel like if you're able to explain it to someone else, then when you have those application questions where it's not directly asking you for like a definition or something, you'll be able to understand, okay, how do I use the information I already know to apply it in this like new situation, right? And kind of jumping back to tip number 1, creating a study system. It's also important to realize that for different courses, you might have to study a little bit differently. I know that for psychology courses, it's very dense in material, so there will be a lot of maybe typing involved and memorizing a lot of information, even if that's not how you want to be, studying for those courses, versus others where it's a lot more practice questions, things like your physics courses and your calculus courses. So really depending on the course, your approach might be a little bit different in how you prepare for them as well.
Yeah, that's great. Like sometimes I'll show up to a math class with a pen and paper while we'll go to a psychology class or a neuroscience class with a laptop, because like obviously there are two different ways of teaching, right? It's not so easy to kind of jot down your formulas on like when you're typing it down compared to writing it.
Yeah, have a mix of both methods, typing and writing. Absolutely. According to the classes. Yeah.
All right, everyone, that's going to do it for our part 2 where we talked about academic tips. Thank you for watching, and please keep your eyes out for part 3, where we'll be talking about productivity tips, building off what we talked about in parts 1 and 2. If you found this to be helpful, please feel free to leave a like, a subscribe would be really awesome. And if you have any tips or any questions you would like us to talk about or that you would recommend, please feel free to comment them in the chat as well. And so without further ado, thank you again for watching. We really appreciate it. And we hope to see you in part 3.